local government officials, right? They're supposed to be very accountable to the people. It's not like it's impossible for us to do things when we're talking about cities. I'd rather that you come and that you speak and you share some information with your government officials and try to make an impact that way.
This is where it all begins, so say goodbye to all your fears, all your doubts. This is where they die. This is where we come to win, we come to fly. This is where we make our dreams come to life. Welcome to Innovation City.
Welcome to Innovation City, a podcast featuring the innovators, disruptors, and creators who are making things happen. My name is Michael T. Johnson, and I'm here with my co-host Tyler Kelly, and we are at Venture Cafe Miami. Venture Cafe is the largest gathering of innovators, entrepreneurs, creatives that are making things happen anywhere in the world. So if you're near a Venture Cafe City on a Thursday night, go check it out. I think you're going to love it. We're very excited tonight because we have Matthew Haber on the show with us. Matthew, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So Matt is a native Floridian and attorney with experience in municipal law. As a former Miami assistant city attorney, Matt has advised the mayor and city commission, drafted municipal legislation, and counseled city boards at numerous public meetings where he noticed even 3 residents with informed comments made a huge difference. Before practicing law, Matt organized for the Obama campaign, including Iowa's caucuses, and worked as an outreach coordinator for Nielsen, a market research firm. And now you're the co-founder of CivicPro.
That's right.
Matt, welcome to the show.
Thank you again for having me.
You're welcome. So tell me about, obviously, you're working in the civic space, but 3 people with information can make a huge difference. That's because most people don't have the information.
That's the unfortunate truth of it. But I think there's more that's going on, right? So there's an interesting sort of dichotomy with local government. On the one hand, it is the vanguard of public services. It's the level of government that is supposed to be closest to the people. At the same time, you don't learn anything about how cities and counties work when you're in school. You really don't have a great understanding for the municipal processes. And if you really wanted to stay informed and keep up with just one city and one county, that would probably be an additional 300 hours of reading every year for you.
Wow.
And it's not fun reading, right? Each one of these things, it's like a resolution of the City of Miami City Commission authorizing the city manager to enter into an interlocal agreement with Miami-Dade County or the school board of Miami-Dade County for the purposes of. And then you finally get to, well, what is this? And you have 20, 30, 40 of these on an agenda for every meeting. So yeah, you're right. Like there's this 3-person thing. It's both because it's very near government for you, where you can be very influential. At the same time, there are some actual barriers to you getting there. And so what we're looking to do with CivicPro is remove those barriers. So it's really easy for folks to show up to these meetings, make sure they're showing up to the right meeting at the right time in the process, that they understand which items at that meeting are most important, and that they have a good understanding of it also.
So where did this idea come from? This obviously sounds like it's from a real experience.
It's from a lot of real experiences.
I'm guessing 3 people showed up and something happened. So
well, that is just something I would like to say that those were the moments that gave me hope when you saw things going well. More often you saw things that didn't go so well. I mean, I think there's kind of 2 sorts of experiences that led to this. One is a bit more universal, right? It's just all of us have been someplace, be it in a meeting or a dinner, where you just wanted to be heard, and that wasn't happening, and that's a really stinky feeling. And so seeing that in a context where you're dealing with, local government officials, right? They're supposed to be very accountable to the people, and seeing that transaction not work out. So that's one part of it. But more directly, right, I do have a lot of experience in city government. And I would frequently see it where the city would undertake maybe a year-long process. And 6 months into that process, you would have some residents show up. They would have great comments. I mean, really well-taken points that if you're not in their shoes, you might not have thought of. But the problem is they're 6 months into a year-long process, and the city's already, made legal commitments, and it can't turn course now. Had they shown up earlier, that, really would have been great. And bluntly, that's, systemically, it's a hard problem for one local government to solve. It is, however, not a hard problem to solve if you're a third-party actor who's aggregating, who's compiling together lots and lots of government data and trying to make it easier for people to sift through. So what CivicPro is at the end of the day is we're trying to build a very simple system. So with just a couple clicks, you can say, hey, these are the issues that matter to me. Let me know when something's coming up so that I know it's important and I can go speak on it at the right time.
That's super important because I think a lot of stuff gets pushed through without citizen engagement because the people doing the pushing understand the process and understand the right time to get involved, as opposed to, most of us just, residents, we hear about it like after it's already like 6 months in, like you say. So I love the idea of an app, a website, CivicPro.
Yeah, it's a web app.
So, the aggregation of the data is going to help people to determine, like you said, the right time to show up. So what are some of your challenges as, so you've been in the civic space, what are some of your challenges in the app space?
Sure. I'm sure the listeners are a little less interested in some of the technical challenges. Those range from just very ho-hum to actually things where we have to get very creative. I think it's a little bit more interesting to talk about, though, how we present the information, because our goal isn't for you just to look on your screen and go, oh, isn't that interesting? Mayor Suarez, votes a lot in favor of this kind of item, but not so much in that kind of item. That's good information, but I'd rather you show up to a meeting. I'd rather that you come and that you speak and you share some information with your government officials and try to make an impact that way. Really, again, like cities and counties, you're never more than 20 minutes from the seat of power, right? If you're trying to go to Tallahassee, that's 9 hours from where we sit right now. If you're trying to go to Washington, D.C. and influence Congress, that's a lot harder also. So this is something where it's really easy to get to, especially if it's a committee meeting, right? Committee meetings are usually on weeknights. Sometimes it's like Thursday at 6 p.m. Almost no one shows up. There's not going to be a long wait. The items, you breeze through them. And so for one person or three people to show up and say, hey, I'm actually interested in how the city is planning to incentivize resilient design so that as we build all this new construction, we're actually going to be able to survive sea level rise, right? There's real issues that we can take a bite out of at the local level where it's not like it's impossible for us to do things when we're talking about cities. So in terms of the challenges for CivicPro there, I think it's about how do we then present this information to residents in a way that they're going to understand and feel motivated to do something about. I always look at it like there's three initial problems we're solving. So one is the time and place of local decision making. And I think that one is fairly straightforward, both for a human and for a technical system to figure out how to tell people what's going on. The other one is how to prioritize these mounds of information that the system's receiving. And that is a little bit more nuanced, but at the same time, it's just not something that the user is going to be as familiar with, so they're viewing that a bit more passively. I think the place where we start to get into, well, how do we incentivize in-person engagement so that you understand what's going on? That's a little bit more difficult. So I mentioned before, what a city resolution or ordinance might look like, right? It's this very long legalistic language. Even the title for one of these things can sound like a legalistic run-on sentence that runs the length of a paragraph. So we've been working on an algorithm that will summarize that. It'll make it plain English. So let's say, you have a county ordinance and the thrust of this ordinance is, let's do something funny, it's illegal for politicians to lie, right? That's never gonna happen, but let's say that's the case. So, we have an algorithm that could give you an ordinance, to make it illegal for politicians to lie, right? But that's not how it's going to appear on the agenda. It's going to say, an ordinance of the County Commission amending section 2-11.1 of the County Code entitled blah, more particularly amending this section with the title of for the purpose of da-da-da-da-da. And by the time you get to that part that's saying to make it illegal for politicians to lie, you've already lost the reader. And so sure, we can summarize out that bit in an email alert or an SMS text or something and give it to you. But when you go and attend the meeting, how are you going to find the real one? Because the summary is not appearing on that agenda. So now we have to teach you how to read, oh, this is an agenda item number, or this is where you can expect it to fall. So it's a lot that there's a lot, I think, of where we need to be more creative and find interesting behavioral solutions to make this a simplified process.
So in terms of the county's data, like, is it just, like, for lack of a better phrase, Word docs that you have to pull the information out, or is it more organized on their end, or is it you're presented with mounds upon mounds and you have to figure out a way to organize it yourself?
Yes. All of that was a yes.
Yes.
So the county's data is, I would say, fairly well organized for a local government, right? They're actually one of the easier for Miami-Dade County. They're one of the better organized governments that we deal with. But it's organized in a way that you kind of have to be a professional to understand. Fortunately, I used to write this legislation, well, not at the county, at the city of Miami, but it's similar. It's a pattern that I understand. Our system's set up to understand it and bring structure and meaning to it as well. The trouble, I think, there on the technical side is making sure that the system can be accurate within all the strange permutations of how a human might publish that information. But it is mounds of information. It's all public record. It's all out there historically. That's actually, when you're compiling massive amounts of information to find patterns, really helpful. So again, this is one of those things where if you're a human, this is gobsmackingly difficult. If you're a machine, it's actually not that big a deal. And that's kind of what we're leveraging right there, is the fact that you can build a machine that is only reasonably intelligent, that gets through those parts of it much more simply. I think, again, the question is, once we have that information and we've organized it, and now we're presenting it to residents, how do we make it so that they understand it and can do something with it and show up at that meeting and know where they are in the meeting so they can participate effectively? That's the whole game here, is building tools to make it easier for residents to more effectively participate in the decision making.
Are you guys nonprofit, or?
We are a for-profit company. A lot of that goes to really just two thoughts. As an attorney, it's easier for me to set up a for-profit entity than a nonprofit entity. But at the same time, our thought was that there might also be an enterprise component to this. So, we're working with the Knight Foundation. We got a grant from them through the Knight Cities Challenge. We're working with a whole coalition of nonprofits and government actors, including Catalyst Miami. So, Adil Ascaris over there has been very helpful. So has Raul Moas at the Knight Foundation. We've worked with Radical Partners. So Sarah Emmons has been hugely helpful. But that's all on this free product that we're building, that there's a lot under the hood, but at the end of the day, when you as the user view it, it is meant to be incredibly simple, right? Like, you are supposed to not need to know much more than, I care about affordable housing, or I care about the environment, like, let me sign up for that. Like, that's really it. Our thought is also that we can scale this thing and keep it sustainable through a separate enterprise product, something more akin to like a Bloomberg terminal, but for local government, that we can sell to various firms that are interested in this information, be it law firms or government relations firms, et cetera.
Yeah. So we talked about at the beginning, you're native from Florida. Mm-hmm. Are you native from Miami?
No, I was born in Hollywood, so okay. Not too far, but still across the county line.
Sure. So you've obviously seen like some of this ecosystem, the entrepreneur ecosystem here. Tell me about kind of your thoughts on how things have changed in this area and where they're headed, and if you're seeing like encouraging things. This is totally shifting gears from the other conversation.
I would say that I may not be the right person to answer that question. Like, I am very involved in the local civic scene here, and I've seen that change a lot. I'm a little less involved in what you would think of as like the traditional startup scene. Like, again, my goal with CivicPro is to build tools to help people participate in a process. Yeah. Right. And so we want to see increased levels of civic engagement. If you, there's research out there that shows that Miami has the lowest levels of non-electoral civic engagement in the entire country, right? So only 3.1% of Miami residents have ever attended a public meeting. If you compare that to Jacksonville, which is also still not a hotbed of civic participation, about 9% of Jacksonville residents have attended a public meeting. So that's 3 times the number we have down here. I don't believe that is entirely due to cultural factors. It's certainly not due to legal factors. So my thought really around technology has been, how can we use it in service to this specific mission? And how can governments better equip themselves to empower their citizens, right? So there are governments doing really interesting things in the tech space right now. So if you look at the town of Miami Lakes, for a long time, well, not a long time, but for a few years now, they've been doing remote public comment for their public meetings. So remember, the whole thing was we want people to attend these meetings in person, rather. I think in person is still the most powerful way to change a government official's mind. But let's say you can't make it, right? Like, let's say you have to work a second job and you can't make a 6 p.m. meeting on a Thursday night, or 9 a.m. meeting on a Thursday morning. So Miami Lakes has made it so that you can go in through YouTube or just upload online a video of your comment, so that you don't even have to attend the meeting. It'll be played right there. Now they're setting up a system, which incidentally, it's only costing them $600 a year. So these things aren't even expensive, right? But $600 a year so that people can remotely do public comment live into those government meetings. So they don't even have to leave their home. You also even see things that are completely low tech and also zero cost that make a huge difference. So if you look at the town of Bay Harbor Islands, a small municipality if there ever was one, and you read their government documents, especially for public meetings, they do have those long run-on sentences like a resolution of the da-da-da-da-da, but below every single one of them, they have a one-sentence plain English translation of what that is. So if you're a resident, it's okay, I don't need to read that top thing. That top thing is useful for a professional. It tells me a lot about what's going on. But as a resident, I just want to know the impact of this thing and what it is and read it really quickly. The city of Miami does something similar for their planning board meetings, but only there, So it'd be a nice thing to see low cost or zero cost changes like that implemented at a broader scale.
So let's, you guys get the app up and running and people begin to, interact with it. So everything is going the way that it should.
Which that never happens. 5
years from that point, how have you changed the landscape?
I would really like to see an uptick, especially in Miami, being that this is where I've made my life as an adult. I would really like to see an uptick in that non-electoral civic engagement rate. That's usually defined as being you're attending a public meeting, or you've communicated in some way with a government official. 3.1% is really, that says something. And to me, it says that, our government is not necessarily running its business in lines with the wishes of the population. How can it be when it's hearing from so few of us? And that's not, to be clear, that's really not a dig at local government. People work really hard there. A lot of my friends still work at the city of Miami. What I'm saying is actually, rather than building a system that is teaching people to be reactive citizens to the agenda of government or whoever else is talking to government, sure, that's an important part of it, but teaching them to be proactive so the citizens themselves can set those agendas, so that things that they want to see appearing on it appear on the agenda before the government, so that these commissioners and council members are actually doing the people's business. When we were designing this system, we did a survey of county residents from every zip code in Miami-Dade County, all ages, all education levels, all income levels. And we were asking them about their priorities in local government, things that they wanted to see done. The number one issue was affordable housing. I can pull up right now just to double check. So it was affordable housing was the first one, crime and safety was after that, education after that, jobs and wages next, and then environment, and that rounds off the top 5. Certainly, local governments do a lot on crime and safety and affordable housing. The school board obviously is all about education, but we really don't see that being the primary focus. When you go to a government meeting, whether it's the city, the county, a special district, most of it's about land use and zoning. That's not a problem, right? Land use and zoning is how you can attain affordable housing. It also can lead to things like resilient design standards, but when we asked people how much they cared about that as an issue more broadly, it fell way outside the scope of the top 10. I think it was in the 20s in terms of being a priority. And it was actually tied at the same level with Wi-Fi access. And you'll very rarely see a government in Florida talking about Wi-Fi access as being a priority to just, totally keep the air clear. Then Commissioner, now Mayor Suarez, actually did bring up Google Fiber a few times to the City Commission for its consideration. But, we still don't have incredibly high-speed access. We don't have, Wi-Fi broadly available to residents for free. And not saying that needs to happen now or that's a top priority, but my point is that government is spending a lot of time on something that residents prioritize fairly low and less time on things that they clearly care a lot about.
As you say that, because that does have an impact on the things that they care about later on down the line.
Sure.
It kind of reminds me of like that, we all learned this in grade school, like that graphic, how a bill becomes a law. Like you almost need one of those, like CivicPro needs to do one of those for county, like how land use affects affordable housing, like what's the path
Absolutely.
Of that?
Yeah, I mean, and so that kind of brings us to that point again we were talking about. Like there are those three issues. Two of them are either straightforward or kind of under the hood. But when we're talking about the last issue, like how do residents understand these things and how can we help them understand it and navigate that process when they get there? I clearly don't think it's just about, oh, it's easier to read this thing now. It needs to have some context. And I think that's where we need to rely on humans a little more. And that kind of takes us, I think, outside of the tech space and more into just the civic ecosystem, right? Like having a nice group of stakeholders together who can say, hey, we're going to have a town hall meeting on this issue because it's really important to us. And, be it an HOA or a nonprofit or a labor union or anything else, or even a newspaper, right? Like news media has a role to play here as well. So, I think when it comes down to contextualizing those processes, it's just hard to take people out of the equation.
I love it. Tell me, how can people get involved with CivicPro? How can they learn more about the web app, sign up for testing, what, all of the above?
So all of the above happens in really one place is the easiest way. If you go to our website, it's getcivicpro.com and sign up for our newsletter. That's the best way to also become a beta tester. Right now, we have information for City of Miami, Miami Beach, Miami Gardens, Miami-Dade County, and we are currently in the process of expanding to Coral Gables, Doral, Fort Lauderdale, Hollandale, and Hollywood. More will come in the offing, but that's where we have information for right now. If you live in one of those areas, please sign up so we can rely on you as a beta tester and make sure this thing works.
Wonderful.
Now, what about you? Where can people connect with you if they want to be involved in something you're doing in some way?
Either DM me on Twitter, it's just the Get CivicPro account, or you can fill out the contact form on the website and I'll respond.
Awesome. Matt, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, guys.
Pleasure.
For more episodes, visit innovationcity.co. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. And if you're in Miami, visit us on Thursday nights. Details are at venturecafemiami.org. And be sure to connect with us on social at We Are Slam and at Venture Cafe MIA. Thanks for listening.
This is where it all begins, so say goodbye to all your fears, all your doubts. This is where they die. This is where we come to win, we come to fly. This is where we make our dreams come to life.